Hi, Vanessa. Welcome to Seasons of Motherhood this morning.
Thanks, Andy.
It's a joy to have you here. Thank you for being willing to come and to share a little bit about your journey of motherhood so far in your life. It's a
I'm
pleasure.
so glad to be here.
Yes, it is. Well, we have a very cool connection. We
Yes.
didn't realize this, but we walked into class together at Heritage College and Seminary and ended up taking some courses together. And that was just a delight because I had always wanted to meet you. So here we are in class together, and now we're talking to each other on Zoom. It's just so funny how God works. I love
I
it.
love it. It's so great. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So I hear you're going back. And how many courses do you have left?
I have three left. So this is my third that I'm in the
Okay.
middle of or just starting. So
Okay. All right.
yeah, about the halfway mark. So
Yeah.
it's been a good experience going back to school after many years.
Yes, I completely relate because 2 years ago when I stepped onto campus, I just said, what am I doing? What am I doing? Am I crazy?
It took a little while to like get that student brain and like the balance between like now I don't just have only myself and my own deadlines to think about. I have like dinners and ministry and
Yes.
this and that. And
Yes.
so it was a bit of a shift, but I love it. I love it.
You know what? I feel the same way. It was getting into a groove, but it's something that God called me to do. And obviously, He planted it in your heart too. So it's been neat. So I love it how God brings us together. So
Mhm.
that is why we are here today, because of Heritage bringing us together. So very exciting. So you had written a beautiful blog post, which will be going up shortly, that people will be able to read. And you talked about the concept of grief and motherhood. And it's a topic that obviously is a very tough one that we don't ever want to embark on. But I know a lot of women out there have experienced various different levels of grief in their life, and it can be from a prodigal to a loss of a child or a marriage or parents or jobs or whatever. Grief is just so wide and vast, but it touches every single one of us in one way, shape, or form in
Mhm.
our lives. And so I'm just so thankful that you're here today to talk a little bit about this topic. And I know it will be an encouragement to many people that will have an opportunity to watch this today or for a little bit later on. But first, I just wanted to introduce you. So, Vanessa, you are a lovely mother of three beautiful boys, and Jude, who's now obviously with me, are going to talk about in heaven. And you are the wife to Jamie. And just to make sure I read it properly, he is the discipleship and interim ministry team lead at West Highland Baptist Church. So, how long have you guys actually been involved in ministry?
In ministry or at our church
Okay,
now?
well, maybe to the church now.
Yeah. Yeah,
And so, how
actually,
long?
today is the 4-year anniversary of moving into this house when we
Really?
moved to Hamilton to when Jamie took on. Because he started working in the summer and we were attending during the summer, but we didn't move until
Okay.
this day 4 years ago, which is
Wow.
September, I think it's the 14th.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
we're recording. So,
Well, that's
uh,
exciting.
yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so we moved from Guelph, so not too far, but a different city and a big move for our whole family.
Big
And the first time Jamie accepted a role that in a church that we weren't already attending, so it was a little
Okay.
bit different coming in, not already having pre-established friendships and relationships, and just getting to know the lay of the land, what the history of the church was, and but we love it, and we are so thankful to be at West Highland. And Jamie's that last part of his title is because our church is in transition right now. Our lead pastor retired in June, and so Jamie's taken on a lot of the leadership roles as we search for a new lead. So
Wow, that's a big responsibility. That's a lot.
it's been a busy summer for him, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, getting ready for the fall and for the year. And well, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. That's wonderful. So at the beginning of this blog post that you shared is beautiful. And you talk about the whole concept of a grief that I know a lot of moms don't even think about this is going to happen. You're just newly married, you're trying to get pregnant, and then all of a sudden your whole perspective has changed because you realize that you have actually miscarried. And I have so many women have dealt with that or don't talk about it or have suppressed it because it's just something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. And so my question was like, how did you navigate that initial unexpected moment in your marriage just right at the beginning?
Yeah. I think I'd always known I wanted to be a mom. We weren't necessarily trying. It was a bit of like I guess I'm pregnant. And then it was that joy that set in like, okay, yeah, I think we're ready. We want this. This is obviously the Lord's timing. And And then it was only 4 days later that I started miscarrying. So, yeah, I think I'm so thankful for Jamie. He really just came into a supportive role. I'm not sure, to be honest, we haven't talked about that miscarriage in a really long time. So I don't even really know like where he was at. I think there was some sadness, but it was a lot of just support for me, who was clearly distraught and quite upset. And it's a scary thing. It's a scary thing. And so, but he really settled into a beautiful supportive role. And we were at the time working with a parachurch organization on university campuses, Power to Change.
Okay.
And so we had a great team and super supportive, and we didn't even have time to tell anybody. We had 4 days to like process the news, and then it was gone. And so it was really difficult to let people in and say like, I was pregnant, but I'm not pregnant anymore. And yeah, I think for us, there was that initial grief, and yeah, it was just some distress for me. But I think it was more like, oh, we want this. And so thankfully our story doesn't include years of infertility after that and trying. We were able to get pregnant with our firstborn, Noah, fairly shortly after. And I think that probably served as a comfort in, yeah. So, but I can imagine many women would understand, the feelings of sadness, of sorrow, of frustration and anger, and just a lot of, I think there's shame that comes with miscarriage. Some, people don't want to talk about it, or are afraid people will shut them down or say that their sorrow is not valid. It wasn't, it was barely a human. And so I think having those people come around me and like validate that and acknowledge that we're sad, this is a life, and
we're sad with you.
Yeah. And so that was a beautiful thing to experience in their community. And I'm really thankful for that, because I know not everybody has that. And they really showed me the love of God in their words and their actions, and just the space and the grace that they gave. So
that's
I'm
really
thankful
beautiful.
for that. Yeah.
That is beautiful. I love your quote. You say, surely I was still a mom because my heart had already exploded to include this new life into it. And I think that what I take from that, and you can share more about what you meant by that too, but when you do find, even before you find out you're pregnant and you're desiring to be a mom, and then you find out and then you're not, you go through so many waves. And I think it's so important, just as you talked about, to have community around you to talk about that grief and lament the loss, and what is God doing through this, and just have people surrounding you and praying for you, because it really does get embedded in your heart. And then you think, okay, Lord, why did you put this in my heart? And now it's not. So so how would you talk about that with somebody who feels like it's there, and then it's not, it's in my heart, but now what?
Yeah, I think that idea of being a mom but not having your child to hold or to raise, or to experience any of those things that we expect that comes with motherhood, is a really there's just like a cognitive dissonance, really, of like how, like, I've changed. I've physically, there's all those studies, right, about like how motherhood changes the chemical, I'm not a scientist, but the chemical makeup of a mother, and even without being a scientist, like, I've changed. There's something in me that is different. I've taken on this new identity as mom, as mother. And I think when you don't have that baby, that child there, it is important to have a community. And I think it's very important to be honest with yourself, and the shoving down, like, I think, and I can talk about this later, when we journeyed through the death of Jude, we had someone kind of share with us about, in grief, there's like these two trenches on either side of like stuffing down and refusing to acknowledge and trying to put on a happy face, and then also with the just wallowing and being in the depths. And there's like there's kind of like this middle ground of like, yes, I am so sad. I feel like my heart is ripped out, or however you feel. Like, I think it's good and right to be honest with both yourself and the Lord and with a trusted person or a few people, right? Like, just to acknowledge. And then I think that helps to move through it.
Yes.
I really don't like the saying like move on.
No.
As if you've left it behind you. But like move through it and move forward. Because,
right. I think the forward is key. It's forward. It doesn't mean you forget. It's Yeah,
because you're always going to take this with you. And so, this idea of like still being a mom but not having a baby was a difficult thing to wrestle through.
Oh, for sure.
And it's just an awful feeling, really, because we look at the world and it's broken. It's clear it's not how it's meant to be. And this, I think, is just another way that this plays out, where mothers don't have their babies to hold.
Yeah.
That's just a clear point to like, we need Jesus. This world needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
Because it's not right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I love how you talked about the trenches, because I wanted to ask you about how you feel grief and motherhood exist. And I think you actually talked a little bit about that with the trenches idea, but how would you share that concept of grief and motherhood and the existence of both of those?
Yeah, I think there's far more grief in motherhood than we sometimes are willing to acknowledge, whether it's even like the grief of like our hopes for this child. Like maybe we had wanted them to do this and they did this. There's like that grief over that. There's like things like miscarriage, or even a child with, a physical or mental disability. There's a grief that comes with that. Like you talked about, like a prodigal, like a child who wanders from the faith, who rebels against the Lord, or, there's grief that's just so deeply tied with motherhood, unfortunately. And I think that even as I was like reading for our class coming up, we have to read through the Bible and talk about like different women in scripture and Eve, right? Like the curse is like pain in childbearing, but it's like pain in child rearing, or pain in motherhood. It's tied irrevocably until Jesus comes back. And I think it's easy to focus on that. Like I said, the two trenches. So for me, my temptation is always to wallow. There's almost like a sense of like satisfaction, or almost like the more I feel sad about this, the more I remember how much I love this person, and and so for me, that's my trench that I can often fall into and I want to battle against. And so acknowledging that there is that grief and that there's sorrow and sadness, and that it's like, so the middle is the path of life and we walk through it, and there's always like joy and sorrow, and sometimes the joy is really big, and like as if they're like little buddies, right? And so the joy buddy is really big and loud, and it's easy to pay attention to, and the sorrow one's really small. And sometimes the sorrow one, but they're both always there.
Yes.
And I think I go back and I watch videos of a week after Jude died, we're at the park and my kids do something silly and I laugh in the video, and I watch it and I think, how was I laughing?
Right.
But it's always there. It's just, which is bigger at the time. And I think the challenge is not to ignore one or the other.
True.
But, when the sorrow is bigger, to ask the Lord to show you where the joy is, to just give you that glimpse. And I think we see in scripture, the psalmists, and in especially Lamentations, right? Like there's like a beseeching of the Lord to show himself, to show his glory, to give us to that joy again, even in the midst of our sadness. And so I think it's always there. I didn't really talk about this in the blog, but our family spent a couple years in Uganda working with Power to Change on mission. And I would talk about joy hunting with my boys. Today we're going to go on a joy hunt. It was a hard day, right? Like one of the kids had been up all night and we were all tired. We're like, we got to hunt for joy today. It's a treasure hunt and the treasure is joy at the end. So
I love that so much. What a beautiful visual. Your boys must have been very young then at that time, right?
Yeah. So we went over, Noah was about to turn, he was 3 turning 4 and Jude had just turned 2.
Wow, that would have been really hard with the little one.
And Blaze, and Blaze was born there. So we went with 2 and came home with 3.
So. Oh, that's so neat. Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool. We'll have to talk more about that maybe in another session we can have and talk about your time in Uganda, but that sounds amazing.
So it was hard and beautiful. I think like most of life tends to be. But yeah, we would joy hunt there. And I still think of that and I think, okay, today I need a joy hunt because
I love it. I think it's great because we need that. We need a visual like that sometimes when we just can't pull ourselves out of what seems to be an endless pit. And I was actually just talking recently with a friend of mine who experienced a pretty traumatic injury. And in her recovery, she was really honest about how she goes, okay, I'm just going to allow myself to cry right now. I'm just going to cry. And I'm just going to get it all out. And then I'm going to try to like move forward. And I thought, everybody has a different way of kind of attacking that moment in a way that works best for them. And it could be completely different the next time. But I loved how she was willing and vulnerable to share how, I cried and it was hard. And I can relate too. You cry when things are hard and that's okay. It's a part of our makeup. And, but having people around you knowing that you are at that moment, I am crying now. And what is it that I need from other people? It's almost like they need to be told ahead of time, okay, when I get into this mode, this is probably what you can do best for me. Right? And I'm sure you had lots of people come around you and surround you when there were moments of sorrow and moments of joy and then moments of just kind of the mundane, and that's what community really is.
And that community aspect was, I would say, one of the biggest struggles for me, that I feel like I learned because I mentioned I had 3 miscarriages and the second one, I struggled with a lot of anger. And the third one, I started to allow people back in. And then with Jude, I'm married. Jamie and I are both introverts, but I think Jamie is more extroverted than me, at least in how he processed his grief, whereas I wanted to hermit away and not see anybody. And so the act of allowing people into my grief was really difficult, but I knew it was valuable. We had a close friend who passed away from leukemia. It was 2 years before. It was in 2014, and my friend Sue's and her husband. So her husband passed away, and the way that they let our church family into their lives and walk with them through their grief and processing was a gift that taught me so much. And I see how the Lord used that to prepare me to walk through grief of losing Jude. And they modeled. Allowing, because it really is an allowing of others into this sacred space of deep grief.
It is.
But it's hard and it is a sacrifice, and I didn't realize it how much until we had to walk through that ourselves. And so I'm thankful for that, because without that, I don't know.
It's true.
I would have just gone in even deeper, I think.
Right. I love that term, the act of letting people in, because you're choosing to. It's an action and it's a willingness, and therefore it means you're vulnerable and you're opening yourselves up into the deepest part of your soul. But people are coming in and being Christ's hands and feet in a way that you just cannot simply be. And it's a ministry on both sides.
Yes.
Just like you said, you experienced with the loss of your friend. You didn't know that was preparing you for this, and other people didn't know they were being prepared, walking you through for something else. It's just like God doesn't waste anything. He uses every little thing to just kind of move us forward and for us to become more like him and to be his hands and feet to other people.
And it was a ministry, like how you said, it's a ministry to both. And I think we don't even realize how far reaching it'll go. Our oldest was actually baptized just under a year ago. And in his testimony, he said, he made a comment about losing his best friend and how you would think that would force him away from God, but what it did was bring him closer when he saw the church come around us. And I bawled like a baby when I heard him say that. I just thought, how beautiful. This is how the church needs to operate. And so I'm always like in my small groups or when meeting one-on-one, I'm like, we need to be vulnerable and we need to ask for help, because you think you're the only one benefiting, but you're not. Like, it's such a blessing to be able to give, and you have no idea how far-reaching the implications will be because of it.
It's so true. When I broke my ankle a few years back and I was bedridden, and it was COVID, and it was just not a very lovely time, and I had meals brought constantly, and I'm telling you, my girls, because the boys, they were still kind of at their school location. And so the girls were actually home, and they'd said, Mom, this is unbelievable. Look at all this food we're getting. And they were so ministered to by so many people they're like, who are these people? Like, some of them they didn't know. A lot of them were from church, and then there were neighbors, but it was just this constant flow of, this is what I want to do. I can't come in and be with you, but I can shop for you. I can cook for you, because we couldn't even see people face.
I know. Yeah.
Right? But it's in those moments that you don't realize the far-reaching implications of how they were being ministered to and affecting their lives. So you say the quote here in your blog, grief partnered with motherhood was familiar, but the joy always seemed brighter, louder, and real, and more tangible. I want to talk a little bit about what that joy is in that quote that you said.
Yeah, I think it's probably an umbrella almost of like, I'm a big fan of the everyday joys, the small joys. Even I was on a hike yesterday with a friend, and it was pretty cloudy, and at one point the sun came out and it just came through all the trees, and I just went, oh, and it's just like those moments of like, wow. And it was just sun coming through the trees. When you say it, it's like, that's nothing, but it was a joy. And so I think things like that, or, I remember a friend giving me Ann Voskamp's book, the 10,000. I can never get the title right, but 10,000 Gifts or whatever.
I think it's 10,000 Gifts.
Yeah. In Uganda, and I read it and just thinking like there's so much beauty around us. There's so much joy and wonder and awe.
Yeah.
I think she would call them glimpses of glory. And so there's things like that, right? Like watching my kids play contentedly. I always say my kids are all out of this stage now, but when the boys were little, it's usually like around 2 to 3.5 or 4 when they lie down on the carpet and they take a car and they drive it back and they make, it brings me so much joy. I can't even explain. So like things like that, right? Small little things. Just like those, when you stop and be present, there's so much joy.
Yes.
So I think things like that. But then just, reading my Bible and getting an aha moment, or just having that exact comforting word given, or just having a friend speak words of truth and affirmation, and just there's worshiping and being overcome and the Sunday service, or there's so much joy. And I think like I quoted from Nicholas, I can't remember his last name. I can't
remember his last name either. It's
Woolstorff or something.
I think it's
Lament for a Son. Yeah. And he talks about like how sorrow is now the sea instead of happiness, and happiness are the islands instead of sorrow. And I related very deeply to that, because I did feel like the foundations had completely shifted topsy-turvy, and so it was like looking for those islands of joy in the midst of sorrow.
Yes.
As a place to kind of like ground myself and feel a little bit more settled. And I think also there's the fulfillment in the before of like, I always wanted 4 or 5 kids, and look at this family God has given us, and we have 4 boys and we're all healthy, and like that kind of thing, like just having joy in that, and that temptation to curse God and die after those joys were removed.
Right.
It's my satisfaction in the Lord or in the gifts the Lord gives me.
Yeah.
My hope in the Lord or in the gifts. So, it was definitely just, there was so much joy. I don't even know if I could say it was this one thing. It was all of the things.
It
right?
is. And it's a great way to describe it, because it really is true. It's in the little things, and seeing, just like even dropping off my daughter today, this outdoor ed program that she goes to, and just the joy on her face and the anticipation of being outdoors all day, and the small group of people, and this couple that runs it. It just fueled me and filled me up. I drove away just so grateful for just the moment of watching her be filled with joy. Right? Yeah. So when you experienced this tragedy with Jude back in 2020, you talk about how grief, flooded you, and how you had a different kind of desperation for God over the past few years. What would that desperation look like for you? Just maybe share a little bit about what that would look like for your desperation for God now, than it would have been even previous to 2020.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have said that I had a desperation for God before. I'm a pretty independent, self-sufficient type of person. I'm the eldest of 4 myself, and just kind of taught to, like, you want something, you make it happen, you get it done. And so I have always, I don't like this term, but I was always like, just put on your big girl pants and get it done. That was kind of like, make it happen.
Yeah.
And so there was always kind of just like a felt like, I've got this. Because, even motherhood was hard, and there were definitely low points, especially in the early days of sleep deprivation, and then through toddlerhood, when they say no to everything. And also I'm with a 7-year-old who feels like a toddler right now, but anyway, there's just there wasn't the desperation. There would maybe be moments of like, Lord, I need sleep, help me. But there was just an overall, it was like the Lord showed me how weak I was. I had a friend who said something like, I just don't know how you're doing it. You're just so strong. And I just said, I am a shell. I am a shell. I feel poured out.
Right.
It is, if you see anything good or strong or wonderful coming out of me, it is purely the Lord right now. I am relearning for when I am weak, then I am strong.
Right.
Because I didn't know how weak I was until now. And I can't, the fact that how do you get up and have a shower and brush your teeth and make a meal for your kids and make sure their nails are cut, like, like
everything.
How do you do that aside from the Lord? Jamie and I would say to each other, I don't know how people do this without Jesus.
Right.
How do people walk through intense grief without the strength of the Lord?
Right.
And so for me, the desperation was like, please still be there.
Right.
Please, like I have said all of these things my whole life. I grew up in church. I became a Christian when I was 5, baptized at 16, went to, Bible, all of these things, just building. And I it was a testing. Like all of these things you've said, Vanessa, do you believe them?
Right.
Do you still trust me? Like, it was truly and it still continues to be. It just looks a little different, or maybe a lot different. But just that ongoing, it was like a layer was pulled back, and I could see a little bit more clearly, like, oh, this is the hope, that the death is not the end, that Jesus is returning,
right? That
he sees and counts and collects all of my tears, that I am precious to him, that he weeps with me. He's not saying, just get over it, grab a tissue, put on your big girl pants. Right. Like, I'm not left alone in my grief. No. He's not going to make it go away, but he's not leaving me either.
Right.
And so there was just a desperation for his presence, which I've, it's interesting reading other people's experiences and saying, oh, I wish I had like that experience of feeling the Lord wrap his arms around me. I didn't have that, but I had hundreds of people in my church and literally across the globe. There was I'll tell a story. I don't remember how many months into the grief. It might have been a year. And I didn't like reading a lot of grief books, but I had heard a couple things like, oh, after 3 months, after 6 months, after the first year, people they're not really thinking about you as much. We were still getting a lot of emails and texts and people just checking in on us. And it had maybe been a year and a half. And I just thought, I just felt sad. I felt alone. And I went to the mailbox and there was a little package for me. And it was from a woman in Australia who I don't know, who had heard of my story and owns a jewelry business and makes an earring called the Judes.
What?
And she sent it to me.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah. And I just thought, I was literally feeling so alone, Lord. And you knew it and you planned, because Australian mail is going to take a long time to get here. And just those moments of like, oh, I'm so not alone.
Yes.
Yeah. He's so good and he's so kind and just over and I could tell so many stories of even just in the immediate hours and after, of just the Christian people that I didn't know, like police officer, nurse on the same floor, just ambulance work, like all.
How God just surrounded you, right?
And we didn't find them out right away, all of them. Sometimes it was a little bit later. And there was no doubt in my mind that the Lord loves me and cares for me and is carrying me.
Yeah. Well, we're just about to wrap up here, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here for this wonderful, encouraging time of hearing about your story and sharing about how grief and motherhood and how they exist, but it's all because of what Christ is doing through you and through the community. So thank you so much, Vanessa, for being here today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, we'll talk soon.